Hello, welcome to Monday's programme. I'm Catherine Morrison. Well, before this evening is over, DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson should know if he has enough support from his party to get a deal to restore power sharing across the line. At 7 o'clock, in around 25 minutes or so, we know he will brief his party's 120 or so executive members on what is on the table from the British government. Earlier, he spoke to his MPs and DUP peers at the party's headquarters in East Belfast, from where our political editor, Enda McClafferty, joins us now. Enda, what's the latest?
Well, Catherine, could this be the day when the DUP begin that slow march back to power sharing? Or will this be yet another staging post on what has been a long, drawn-out negotiation? That remains the big question this evening, and that remains a question that we might well get an answer to at some stage later on, whenever Geoffrey Donaldson concludes the series of meetings which he has been hosting today. As you say, he's met his MLAs earlier. Right now, he's in the building behind me speaking to some of his MPs and some of the party's lords as well in London, making it very clear to them the detail that is currently on the table after the negotiation with the government. The big question, of course, is will it be enough to move the party to a very different space? And while the discussions are happening behind closed doors, of course, the party's political opponents have been busy today ramping up the heat against the DUP and warning Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and his party about the risks of doing a deal now, as our political correspondent Gareth Gordon reports.
The task today was hunt the DUP.
Afternoon, Gavin.
Never give me much of a chance.
First stop, Party HQ, for a gathering of peers and MPs, including the party leader, who was intent on doing his talking inside, not out. Don't believe those who say nothing ever happens at Stormont. It does, just not all that's supposed to happen. These photographs could yet become collector's items. Wish you were here, and soon the DUP may be.
Well, there's no doubt that unionism has reached a defining moment. The lead party of unionism, the DUP, has a big decision to make. If it decides to return to Stormont, it is doing much more than that. It is deciding to accept and take ownership, in effect, of the protocol.
Jim Allister is proud to be identified as one of the critics Sir Geoffrey Donaldson took aim at last week, but his views are shared by some in the DUP itself, which could be an obstacle to Stormont's return ahead of tonight's meeting of the ruling party executive.
It's the grassroots of the party coming together. Geoffrey has brought them together as party leader to update them on where they're at with the talks with the government. That's what this meeting is about. It's nothing more and nothing less. And I think the press are a bit over themselves, and some other people gazing into the future in the hope that they've got it right. And I think what Eben Put said last week, these are the real traitors, because they are traitors who go out and brief not only the press, but our opponents as well within the party. It is wrong.
The party tried to keep the meeting a secret. The man who leaked it, the loyalist blogger Jamie Bryson, was in Stormont for a meeting. So is Stormont coming back? As always, the answer is ask the DUP, and they're not currently here. Instead, they're on their way to a venue in County Down, where the answer to that question may become clearer tonight. Gareth Gordon, BBC Newsline, Stormont.
Well, and just as Gareth's package was playing there, we could see the meeting has broken up and some MPs leaving just behind you there.
Yes, that's right. I'm sure you can see some of the MPs. There's Willie McRae and Paul Gervin have just left the meeting here at party headquarters in East Belfast. We're waiting there behind. You might be able to see for Sir Geoffrey Donaldson to emerge from the building. You'll see his car parked right outside there. Now, this follows around 2 hours of discussion between the party leader and some of his MPs and some of his peers, some of those who are not currently on the officer team. So they're, in effect, today getting their full briefing on what exactly is on the table. And you can see the press interest there for Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Press very keen to hear what message he had for his politicians inside the building, and then of course to talk about the message that he's going to be bringing forward to the party executive. You can see Lord Hay there, for instance. He's now left the meeting. Lord Hay, did you get much of a sense from the party leader about where the party sits right now? Lord Hay not saying very much this evening, as you can imagine. We know that whenever he leaves here, he's got about a half-hour drive or so, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, to go to that party executive meeting where about 120 or 130 members are congregated, and they too will get a sense from Sir Geoffrey Donaldson this evening as to where the party sits, if it's ready now to sign up to any sort of a deal that will restore power sharing, or whether they feel there's still some room left for more talks with the government. It is a critical time for the DUP, and it'll be very interesting to see what reception Sir Geoffrey Donaldson receives from those executive members this evening.
What was your sense, Enda, of Sir Geoffrey earlier? Did he seem like a man under pressure?
Well, if he was under pressure, he wasn't showing it, Catherine. He very much felt today like a man on a mission. He had a man on a selling job, essentially, to do today for whatever's on the table to try and get the endorsement of his party behind him. Interesting that although he's having a lot of meetings today, the one body of people who are not meeting, and that are the party officers, of course, they essentially will hold the key to all of this, because only they will make the decision as to whether or not there's enough on the table to tempt the DUP back into power sharing once more. So that is an interesting body that they're not meeting today. So we'll see what develops after the party executive this evening. We know Sir Geoffrey Donaldson is going to speak to the press after that. We're not expecting, though, him to come out and say, yes, it's all OK, we're going back in again. We're expecting him perhaps to try and turn the heat up in London and Brussels to make the message very clear that the party's up for returning to power sharing, but they need a little bit more from both the EU and also for the government before they take that final step. So the stakes are pretty high for the party, not least, of course, because of the outside noise, those unionist voices out there who are demanding that the DUP do not move this evening, do not move an inch in terms of returning to power sharing until all the demands are met.
OK, and for now, thank you, and we'll hear more from you on our late TV News Bulletin. But first of all, let's get into the detail of this possible deal with our economics and business editor, John Campbell. Obviously, John, the offer hasn't been published, but what do you think's in it?
We can be pretty sure that there's going to be some new legislation guaranteeing the access of Northern Ireland goods into the GB market, so-called unfettered access. The reason we know that is because Sir Geoffrey Donaldson asked the Prime Minister about this in the House of Commons late last year. He said, would Rishi Sunak amend a piece of legislation called the UK Internal Market Act in order to do that? The Prime Minister said, yes, he would, in the context of a stormont return. So that is something which is nailed on. We can also be pretty certain there's going to be something around what's known as divergence. And that is because Northern Ireland is still within the EU single market for goods. The rest of the UK is clearly not. So there's the ability of the EU and Great Britain to make separate rules around goods. Now, at the moment, those rules are pretty closely aligned. Over time, they're expected to diverge, so there'll be differences between GB and Northern Ireland. So the more divergence there is, the more potential difficulties there are on the Irish Sea border. So we understand what the government is going to do. It's effectively to say that it will choose not to radically diverge from EU rules in order to prevent the growth of the sea border. And the form that would take is that there would be screening of all new legislation coming forward, and ministers would basically need to say this doesn't interfere in a significant way with the UK internal market.
OK, so some legislation, but what else might there be?
We've heard a lot about something known as an East-West Council, so that would be a political body enabling more meetings between Northern Ireland and UK ministers. It might be modelled along the lines of the North-South Ministerial Council. We're also expecting some form of economic body, which would be modelled along the lines of Intertrade Ireland. Now, Intertrade Ireland was set up under the auspices of the Good Friday Agreement to promote trade across the border. This new body would be about promoting trade across the Irish Sea. Now, these are just a few of the things. I'm not saying this is a definitive list, but these are some of the things which we expect to be in this deal should it emerge.
And hopefully it will emerge at some point, perhaps in the coming hours or days. John, thank you.